All right, we are back live for the second day in a row. The official start of free agency hasn't even happened yet, and the deals and moves keep flying in. This time, of course, we have a few other deals to talk about, but this time, of course, it's the Shaq Mason deal, traded to Tampa Bay for a great return, a first round pick into. Oh no, okay, no second round. No, not a second. Oh right, a fifth round pick in the 2022 draft from Tampa Bay. And not only that, but it is Tampa, who was pretty good last year. So we're not talking about an early fifth round pick. We're talking about a late fifth round pick from Tampa Bay. Just, I mean, not what you're looking for from arguably your best offensive player last year.
Yeah, I would say he was their best offensive player last year. I would say it's not really even close. We don't talk about linemen in that sense usually, but I mean, the definition of being the standard and meeting the standard,
right,
and exceeding it, that's what Shaq Mason was as a Patriot. And I mean, it's hard to believe it's been 7 years, but 7 years in New England, and from day one he over.
awesome.
I mean, you brought him in for a Georgia Tech kid. No one knew if he was going to be able to pass block. He struggled a little bit early on, got better every year, improved, and was one of their best players consistently for I'd say the last 3 or 4 years. And he's gone for a fifth round pick. So
that's right. So, and the Mankins return, as Team Crazy Matt says, was a fourth in Tim Wright. Not great, but still significantly better than what they're getting back for Shaq Mason.
right.
It's again, Tampa, I believe at the time, it's funny, it was Tampa again, was terrible. So it was a pretty good fourth round pick. And Tim Wright didn't do much, but he actually did help them out that year. They won the championship that year. That was 2014. So
It was 14.
so Tim Wright didn't, I mean, not that he was an impact player or anything like that, but he at least like gave them a little bit. And the thing about Mason too, right. And here's a touchdown. Here's the thing about for me, he's cheap. Like, it's not like, I know they freed up cap space. They freed up $7 million of cap space. I get that. But like, he's a top 10, certainly a top 10 interior lineman in the league, I would argue. And so, and his base salary this year is $6.5 million, and next year is $7.5 million. Like, he's really not getting paid that much, and you sell him off because you need cap space.
I mean, but the thing about it is cap space is like the key term there, where he was getting paid 6.5, but his cap hit was much more than that. And it was going to continue to rise, where, I mean, we're going to see it within the next few years. They literally could not afford to lose Devin McCourty. The secondary would be terrible. It'd be the worst in football if they did.
Yeah.
But we're going to see in a couple of years, they're going to be paying, maybe not paying him, but they're going to be paying on that contract until 2026. So I think instead of, keeping a really good player around and paying him however much money you were going to pay him and stretching it out to create cap room, they just decided to cut ties with him. Now they don't have to worry about his cap hit ever again. He's in Tampa. That's Tampa's situation to deal with. The return is really what gets me. I trade away good players all you want. They do it all the time. It's like you haven't been paying attention for the past 20 years if you were shocked and you don't understand it. But for a fifth round pick, I think our guy Barth said it would be the 170th overall pick. That was last year. That was, for context, that was Garrett Wallow. Who, do you know what team Garrett Wallow plays for?
Oh, dude, that guy was a beast last year.
Yeah. Okay.
But nobody's ever heard of that guy. No one's ever heard of Garrett Wallow.
Linebacker for the Houston Texans, right? Started 2 games, just the epitome of a fifth round draft pick. So that's the level player you can expect to get back with that. But they did create, I think it was a little over 7 million. There were conflicting reports. Some people said a little over 6. Some people said over 7. Let's call it 7. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
Still not going to get you much, $7 million in this economy, this NFL economy. So more moves to be made. I would assume N'Keal Harry can be cut and save you $1 million. Maybe traded for a player. I doubt it. There are moves to be made, but right now, just surface level in a box doesn't look great. Doesn't look like they got enough for him. And that goes back to our conversation yesterday about JC Jackson just not getting enough for your players.
Right. It certainly It's certainly not what you were looking for. I believe they didn't have a pick between 123 and 198. Is that accurate? I'm pretty sure that that was the case. They
It
had a
was more than
big
that.
gap.
It was yeah, it was into the 200s. It was
They
from
have a
like
pick of 198. So I think it was, I'm pretty sure
okay.
it was
There you go.
123 to 198. And so you fill at least in that gap. But like,
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't
Yeah, but
really do
you
anything.
don't
Not for
trade a
freaking
starting right
Shaq
guard.
Mason. Like that's stupid. You know what I
Right.
mean?
That's just
So
like a we're looking for things to be happy about, and
right. Oh
that's
yeah,
what
no,
that
no,
is.
yeah. And it is what it is, right? Bill does this all the time. We mentioned Mankins, and they won a Super Bowl that year because he had Brady. It was a little different, right? Your offense was a lot better than it is right now. Trent Brown's still a free agent. We don't know what's going to happen with him. La'el Collins, they've been linked to. Andrew Callahan said that they've been trying to make a trade for La'el Collins, whose cap hit is $15 million this year, by the way. So he's making, a good chunk of money the 3 years left on his deal, $10 million base salary, but his cap hit is high the next 3 years. So, that's one of those things where you look at it and say, like, hey, yeah, maybe we make a trade for La'el Collins. He's good, but is he that much of an upgrade at right tackle that we had to trade Shaq Mason away to make this happen? And that's kind of where you look at it and say, like, there are guys that that we want on the team still. And you can argue the tackle is more important than guard. You can also argue that the Patriots have done a great job at finding those mid to late round guys to come in the inside and play, guard and center, and even undrafted guys as well. But like, you lose both of your starting guards from last year. Who knows what's going to happen with your starting right tackle? And so it doesn't feel great. It's not a great feeling, I can tell you that much. And so there's a lot up in the air when the focus of the team is your quarterback and your running game, and you have a potential to lose 3/5, 60% of your starting offensive line from last year. That's not great. Now I know Mike Onwenu can step in at either right tackle or guard, depending on where they want him to go.
Any of
He's
those
looked
three
pretty good
spots.
in both. He's pretty good in both, so he can play really wherever he wants and wherever they need him necessarily. But you still then plug on Onwenu, and you still got two spots that are missing, and you don't have a guy that can fill in. Justin Aron, not going to cut it. Like Yasir Durant, not going to cut it. Like those guys that are on it's not going to happen. So you have to go out and get two more guys at the minimum. And of course, a long way to go, right? Free agency hasn't even officially started yet, so there's a long way to go. But it's not great, not great.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we kind of covered it. There's not a ton to talk about other than a
Right.
5th round pick. Like that's all you got. But there were a couple other moves made earlier in the day. We could talk about that a little bit. Chase Winovich, everybody, if you're a late wake up person, woke up to the news that Chase Winovich was traded to the Cleveland Browns for Mac Wilson, an off ball linebacker. They're different kinds of players, even though they'll both be distinguished as linebackers. But Mac Wilson, a smaller linebacker, a coverage guy. He's super athletic, but hasn't shown a ton in the NFL. He's played a ton of special teams. It's like Jelani Tavai, but instead of a run stuffer, you get a coverage player, and then they bring
Right.
everything on special teams. That's where I would put the comp in terms of playing time on defense, as of right now.
Ugh.
Yeah, it's tough. Maybe a Harvey Longy, maybe upgrade it just a little
It's
tiny
not
bit.
much better.
Yeah, it's not great. But we've talked about Cameron McGrone and Raekwon McMillan. Both those guys will be
Right.
coming back off of injuries. So that was a move made to the linebacker room. And then Chase Winovich, a guy who 3rd round pick, 4th round pick. It was prior to the 100th pick. So it was a 3rd round pick.
I think 3rd round, yeah.
Was really good as a rookie, 5.5 sacks as a rookie. You can look that up. I might be wrong, but 5.5 sacks as a rookie, was their, top sub package rusher. Played really well on special teams. His 2nd year, he couldn't find out a way to stop the run, so his playing time decreased. And then this past year, he brought, pretty much nothing to the table, which wasn't really his fault. I mean, he can still rush the passer. We all know he can. He can't get on the field because he can't stop the run. So it
Right.
was a player much like N'Keal Harry, where we know it's just not going to work here. So they got out from under it. They moved on. I would expect that they do the same thing with him. And then they re-signed James White, who that was a surprise to me, almost like Onwenu, a 2-year, $5 million deal. I did not think they were going to re-sign him. I thought they were going to go with a younger guy. But I'm happy he did re-sign, because that's just a really good football player who brings so much to the offense. And if you don't have any offensive lineman to block for Mac, he'll be checking the ball off a lot to James White. So
Yeah, and White's great in pass protection as well. And he's a guy I think that can be a safety blanket for Mac, which is nice. Brandon Bolden actually did a really nice job filling in for him last year after he got hurt, but I think bringing James White back in was huge. I kind of thought he'd either retire or be back, especially where you look at it and say the with that injury that he had last year was kind of like, is he ever going to be 100%? He's over 30, but they brought him in, and again, it's 2 years, $5 million. There is it could theoretically get up to 7 with incentives. But I do think it's going to be a solid move for the team. It's probably going to be, a very team friendly deal. So it's something where they say, hey, we'll bring him in, and if he's just not the same guy he was, then he can retire. We can let him go, if we need to, and then we'll go from there. So, so we'll see with that. The Winovich thing was interesting because him and Wilson were both guys who flashed a little bit in their rookie year. Wilson was getting some praise from Tony Romo. Mike Reese tweeted out earlier in the day, and as a rookie, and looked like he was a guy that could kind of go sideline to sideline, not necessarily taking on blocks like some of the bigger guys. He's not necessarily a big run stuffing guy, but gives you a little bit of athleticism in the linebacking core. And then similar to Winovich, has done almost equal to what he did in the first year, his last 2 years. Right, where he just he hasn't done much, hasn't had a ton of pass deflections, really hasn't played a ton of snaps. And so, you've seen him kind of fall out of favor in the locker room and on that team. And so change of scenery could help him. And maybe he comes in and plays similar to what he did his rookie year. And maybe Winovich can do the same thing in Cleveland. They're both, from what I remember about Wilson, just, pre-draft stuff, seems like he's a pretty good player and, and right. A pretty good athlete. Right. And so maybe we come in and we see some of that this year, and maybe we don't. Right. But what the heck? We're going to cut Winovich anyways. They were going to cut Wilson anyways. It's like they're on the last year of his deal. Let's just see what happens, And the Dark Blue Gold with a good question here. Would the trade happen if Brady hadn't unretired? I think there's almost a 0% chance that Tampa would have made the trade. Now, the Patriots, oh, yeah. They would have just traded him somewhere else, I'm sure. But Tampa's not trading for Jack Mason with freaking Kyle Trask at quarterback. So, that's not happening on Tampa's end if Brady doesn't retire. But Patriots could have traded him somewhere else if they were trying to free up cap space for whether it's Trent Brown coming back, whether it's Oleo Collins, whatever the case may be. The specific trade that happened wouldn't have happened. But if they were going to trade him, they're going to trade him, no matter what.
Yeah. They've got a ton. Mike Reese just tweeted out, and I think it's good that we could touch on this. They've got a ton of offensive linemen in that building. Almost none of them worthy of starting right now. That I would right. say, I mean, he's proven it. He can do it. He's not the greatest left tackle in the world, but he's serviceable, and the value that you got out of that first round pick was good enough, in my opinion. David Andrews, captain, phenomenal football player. Mike Onwenu, who started a couple games to begin the year, ended up being their 6th rotational offensive lineman. He can start. I don't know why he fell out of favor with the Patriots, but he did. So we'll see what the deal is with that. But then it's Yodny Kajust, who was a former 4th-round pick who didn't pan out. James Ferentz, who they've had on and off the roster 50 times. Drew Desjardins, who was a Canadian Football League player last year, who they just signed. He was like the premier CFL free agent. Arlington Hambright, who came, I believe, from Chicago, and he didn't play much there. Yasir Durant, they traded.
Epic name, though. I want him to start just because that's an awesome name.
Arlington Hambright's a good name. And it's such a Chicago Bears name.
Speaking of names, did you see? I'm sorry, we're completely going off topic, but I just brought this segue up. Speaking of names, Shaq Mason, dude. Shaq Mason's full name is Shaquille Olajuwon Mason. That's amazing. That's unbelievable. Yeah. That's like a top 10 name of all time. I did not know that. I probably knew that at some point, and then was reminded of it today, and I was like, oh my God, that's the coolest name ever.
Solid name. And just to finish up, Yasir Durant, they traded for him, did nothing. Justin Herron is a swing tackle at best. And then Will Sherman, they drafted last year in the 6th round, didn't make the initial roster and was on the practice squad all year. So
Right.
It's practice squatters and picks that didn't work out, really.
You're right. No, 100%. And that's and so they'll throw more draft capital at it. They'll probably bring in a few guys. You have to assume, and I might be wrong, but you have to assume that you're going to have to add a left guard and a right tackle before the season starts. You're going to have to, You know, and unless you feel that Onwenu is a starting caliber right tackle, and you want to add 2 guards, fine, that's fine. But you're going to want to assume that you want your starting offensive line before the draft happens, because you don't want to be chasing a starting. You're not chasing a guard or chasing a tackle in the draft. You don't want to do that, right? So, and even if that
Right.
guard is a guy that like is a downgrade from what you had last year, fine. I mean, no one, if we had gone into the year last year saying that Ted Karras was a starting guard, people would have been up in arms. People would have been pissed.
Right.
And he played really well last year. So, like, maybe you bring a guy in who has some familiarity. Ferentz isn't that guy, but maybe you bring a guy in who has some familiarity, and you like him, and he can come in and play decently. And then maybe you find someone else. Maybe someone gets cut. Who knows, right? But you got to assume that there's some things coming. Again, official free agency hasn't even started yet, so that there are things coming. But man, a 5th-round pick is just that's one I keep coming back to. It's like you can't even do anything with that. What the hell am I going to do with the 5th-round pick?
Yeah.
Like,
the encouraging thing about it too is, out of all the moves that they've made, they've only acquired 1 player from outside of their system. So
right,
they really haven't even started on their free agency haul.
which is
These
true.
2 days have been spent focusing on themselves. I wrote earlier, it's self-love. That's what the Patriots are focused on right now. They're just focused on themselves. They don't have time for anybody else right now. So, they made the moves that they need to move themselves. I mean, Dante Hightower is still a big question mark whether or not they're going to bring him back. There are a couple other players, but they focused on themselves over the first 2 days. I would imagine tomorrow there are at least a couple moves made. And then it's waiting for the wave of the rest of the big names to get taken off the board,
Right.
and then they go and pick up the scraps. It's what they've done. Other than last year, it's what they've done for the past 15 years. And I don't think that they're going to come out of this without more offensive linemen. Like, they'll sign a couple, they'll draft a couple. If I were willing to bet, they'd spend a 3rd-round pick on a guard, and he's going to start probably week 1, and he's probably going to be really good. That's just what they do. But right now it's like, what the hell are you doing with Shaq Mason for a 5th-round pick? It's jarring, I would say, is the word.
Well, and again,
I'm not mad. I'm just shocked.
Right. And again, it's the same conversation we had with JC Jackson, right? Like, you're going to figure it out. Belichick's going to figure it out. We know that. Like, we know they're going to be okay. They may not be the best offensive line in the league, but we know they're going to be okay. They're going to figure things out. But, like, you had a really good player on a pretty team-friendly deal. And again, maybe you're up against the salary cap, so you have to shed some salary. But that's a pretty team-friendly deal, and he's a very good player, and you got only a 5th-round pick back. It's kind of like, what are you doing? Like you got to get something more than a 5th-round pick back for him, right? So I think that's kind of the conversation where you look at it and say, like, hey, like, at least get a 4th-round pick, at least get something the same as like Logan Mankin's got. And again, Mankin's was high and his contract was running out. So, like, yeah, sure, like, that wasn't, but he was paid a ton of money and he was on an expiring deal, I believe. So, like, yeah, you didn't really have any leverage. Here, you could have played with Shaq Mason for the next 2 years on a pretty team-friendly deal. So that's the stuff for me where it's kind of like, okay, come on. Like, let's get a little bit more out of this stuff than we did. And that we didn't, unfortunately, but they'll be okay. They're going to be okay. We trust in Belichick. Belichick's going to figure it out eventually. Just right now on March 15th, the Ides of March, we're looking at it saying, this is not fun. And I remember back in the day, I remember the last like 20 years before last year, like March and April sucks for the Patriots. It just so happens that the last 2 years we talked about quarterback, and then we drafted a quarterback, which was awesome. And that was cool. And then, last offseason we brought everyone in. And so it was cool the last 2 off seasons.
Last offseason wasn't even an anomaly for the Patriots. Like, NFL teams don't do that. They don't spend that much money. They don't go out and draft a new franchise quarterback. The fact that we saw it live, happening in front of our eyes it's pretty, pretty cool.
It was amazing. It was amazing.
But no, we're back to reality this year. They're the scraps. They're picking up off the scrap heap. I do want to reset a little bit just so everybody knows what we're doing. New England has re-signed since the beginning of the tampering period. Devin McCourty, Brian Hoyer, James Ferentz, Matthew Slater, Nick Folk, James White. They've tendered Jacoby Myers. And they've lost Ted Karras and J.C. Jackson to Cincinnati and Los Angeles. they traded Chase Winovich for Mac Wilson, and then they traded Shaq Mason for a 5th-round pick. So they've made moves. It's just all revolving around their own players. There's one player involved outside of their organization last year. So it's been a little boring, I would say. But
Right.
I would expect things to pick up here soon.
You would think, and I wouldn't be surprised if, at some point in the next week or so, there's a receiver coming in, maybe a cornerback coming in. Ward was a guy that I had kind of penciled in as a target for the Patriots. He got a nice little payday in San Fran, but I thought he was a guy that fit in well. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But yes, for now, this is the biggest piece of news was that Shaq Mason was traded to Tampa. I like a lot of the moves that they did, bringing people back. The McCourty thing, like you said, important to bring him back. James White, important to bring him back. Nick Folk, important to bring. You bring back guys that are important to the team and important not just to the team, but also to the locker room, right? Not on the field, but in the locker room as well.
Yeah.
So that's the stuff for me where I look at it and say, I'm happy with the things that they've done so far. I just wish that they would have paid a little bit more attention to some of this stuff and gotten some real value back for some of these guys. And we'll see. Maybe they don't sign anyone of note and they get a 3rd round back for JC Jackson next year. And we're all good. So we'll see. But anyways, tons of suitors, by the way. Tons of suitors for N'Keal Harry. They're going to at least get a 1st round pick, if not multiple 1st round picks back for N'Keal Harry. I mean, the interest around the league is sky high for him, according to multiple sources.
I can't believe people wanted to draft A.J. Brown and Deebo Samuel over this guy. Just idiots. Who in their right mind?
Oh, brother.
No, I think that'll do it for today, though.
Yep.
Tomorrow, we'll be back with Pat's Nation podcast.
We will be.
Me and your boy Pat. Spags is too cool for us. He's on a trip. This guy goes on more vacations than anyone I know. But it'll just be us two. Hopefully, that's the only time we'll record tomorrow, unless they trade Mac Jones or something. I think we'll just wait until the end of the day and we'll talk about it. So tomorrow, Pat's Nation pod.
Late. I have parent-teacher conferences tomorrow night. I apologize. I have parent-teacher conferences tomorrow night, probably 9:30ish, I would say. But
it's past my
bedtime. Get it in. What are you gonna do? I know. It's the way it goes. So, all right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you soon.